Hey everybody, Rob here at etrailer.com, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Curt T-connector vehicle wiring harness on our 2017 Jeep Patriot. Now our Curt T-connector vehicle wiring harness is going to provide us with a 4-pole flat trailer connector. That way we can have all the required lights to get down the road safely whenever we are pulling a trailer, like our tail lights, our turn signals, and our stoplights. Now our wiring is designed to stay on the outside of the vehicle, which is nice because whenever we do want to hook it up, it's going to be right by our receiver tube, so we won't have to go dropping out of the back of the hatch. Now it is going to come with a dust cover, and I always like to use the dust cover to attach my wiring to the hitch. That way it prevents it from dragging the ground. But if you'd like to put a bracket up, I think adding a bracket not only is going to give it a more of a secure mounting point, but it does look a little bit cleaner. That way our wiring, again, is close to our hitch, but a little bit more secure. Now as far as the installation goes, it's extremely straightforward. There's no cutting or splicing of the factory wires at all, so we don't have to worry about that. We simply just need to remove the taillights, and it's going to use a T-connector style that's going to plug directly into the taillight and into the taillight harness. That way our signals are going to come through and go through the wiring harness, but at the same time also come out through our taillights. Now our wiring does have a powered converter box, so we are going to have to run a power wire up to the battery, and the converter box is going to take the signal from our taillights and turn them into a working signal for our trailer. But at the same time, it's going to protect our wiring, making sure there's no backfeeding. If there were a problem on the trailer end, it's going to protect the Patriot from any kind of adverse problems with the electrical system. Now trailer wiring isn't just good for trailers. There's a lot of different accessories, especially hitch mounted accessories that have lights on them. Maybe a cargo carrier that has a light kit, a step that's lit, or any other accessory like that typically has a 4-pole mounting connector on it, and it's a lot easier to plug it in rather than trying to hardwire it into your Patriot. But now that we've seen what our wiring looks like and gone over some of the features, let's show you how to get it installed so you can have the confidence to do it at home. To begin our installation, we want to open up the rear hatch on our Patriot, and we're going to move to the inside edge right by our taillights. Now we need to get behind our taillights to get to the wiring, and each one is going to be held in by these 2 push pin fasteners. So we're going to grab a flat blade screwdriver or a trim panel tool. Now if you look at the push pin itself, there's a little notch. We want to take your screwdriver and we want to pry out the center section of the push pin. Just kind of work it until we get the center to pop out. That's going to take all the tension off the push pin. And once we can get that center to come out some, we'll go underneath the base and pull the rest of the push pin out. These can be a little stubborn, but again, you want to get that center section popped out first, so that we can get the rest of the push pin out. Now both of these are going to work like that. We're going to have 2 more on the other tail light, so we're going to pull these out, move over to the other side, and pull those out as well. Now once we have both push pins out, we want to grab our tail light. Now there's going to be a little bit of flex here, but you don't want to go pulling too far to the side. If you can, kind of get a grip on that corner. And we want to pull our tail light straight back because there's some alignment pins on the outside. We don't want those to break. A little bit of wiggling, kind of pulling on it, and it'll release. There's those alignment pins on the side. Again, just kind of want to pull straight back. And you can even see this one actually didn't come out. It's perfectly fine. We'll pop that off, put it back into the body of the vehicle. But we're going to come to our taillights, and just so it's easier, we're going to disconnect all the wiring that we won't have to worry about the taillight getting damaged. Slide that red tab back. We'll squeeze the black tab, and we can disconnect the connector. The other one's going to work exactly the same way. And we'll set the taillight assembly aside where it won't get damaged, and we can move over to the passenger side and repeat that same process. So we're going to start by grabbing our harness, and we want to start with the yellow T-connectors, the connectors that has the yellow and brown wires going to it. And you'll notice that these are going to match the connector that's on our taillight. So we're going to take the female and the male, plug them together, And we'll lock down that red locking tab. Make sure it's clicked in all the way. And this end will go directly into our taillight. But we need to get the rest of our wiring down to the bottom, and we need to find a spot to mount our converter box. So before we start feeding all of our wires down, I'm actually going to go ahead and mount the converter box and make a few other connections so that we have an easy access to them back here in the taillight housing area. So to mount your converter box, there's a few different ways you can do it. There is an eyelet at the top. We can use a zip tie and secure it to some wiring, or we can use the double-sided tape and stick it to a nice flat spot on the body. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take this rag with some cleaning material on there. Just going to clean the inside right below the bumper here. So it'll be on the inside of the fascia and be nice and protected. Make sure that spot's nice and clean. And clean the back of the converter box. Then we can grab our double-sided tape and get it in place. Remove the backing off one end. Stick it to the converter box. We can remove the other end of the tape. And we just want to tuck it down to where it won't interfere with our taillight, but again, it's still up high enough that it's going to be protected. And we just press it against the body so it sticks. And that way we still have access to all the other wires coming out of the converter box as well. So we do have a white wire with a ring terminal coming off the converter box. Now this is going to be our ground. Now they do provide you with a self-tapping screw in your kit, and that's what I'm going to use to go directly into the body right here so we can have a good solid connection. So slide my screw through the ring terminal, kind of move everything out of the way. And I'm going to use a 1/4-inch nut driver to get that screw in place. And when you put the screw in, you want to make sure that it's nice and secure and that ring terminal is not spinning around, but you really want to try not to strip out that screw. So we also have a black wire that's already pre-stripped on the back of our converter box. We want to grab one of the butt connectors out of our kit. I'm going to crimp it onto the end of the wire. Then we want to grab the length of 12-gauge wire out of our kit. We just need to find the end of it for now. We'll strip it back. We're going to put it into the other end of our butt connector, because this wire is going to need to get ran up to the battery, and it's going to provide power for our converter box. Now at this point we should have a long black wire, our 4-pole wire, and a green wire. All of these need to go down underneath our Patriot. So we're going to push our wires between the fascia and the body here so that we can get access to them underneath. So you just want to find the end of your wires, all the connectors, and we just kind of push the taillight wiring aside, and we're going to start feeding all the slack down in between the body till we can get access underneath. Once you have a little bit out, you should be able to grab it underneath and just kind of help feed all that slack down below. So all your wires should come out at the very back of the bumper in the corner area here. Now we want to go ahead and just leave our black wire over in the corner for now. We want to route our 4-pole wire, get it kind of high, maybe connect it to the hitch so it'll stay away from our exhaust here. And we want to route it to where the 4-pole connector will be close to the end of the hitch here so we can tie it off and have it ready for us. And at the same time, we want to route our green wire going all the way across, and we're going to go up into the passenger side taillight and make our connections over there. Now that I have my green wire routed over and secured behind the fascia here, the way we're going to get our wiring up, as you can see, I already ran an Airline tube from underneath, and I just fed it up going that same path between the fascia and the body. And I took some electrical tape and attached it to the connector here. That way we can move up top and just grab the Airline tube, and it should bring our wiring up. That way we can make our connections. And then once I have it up, what I like to do is I'll pull all the slack out. I'll actually zip tie it to the existing wiring right here. That way, we still have slack at the connector and for the taillight to come out. We don't have to worry about the wiring falling back down. And we can just plug in our connectors just like we did before. Make sure they're fully plugged in. Slide that red locking tab over. Now we can reinstall both of our taillights since all the connections are made back here. So whenever you plug them in, don't forget to slide that red locking tab in place. Then we just kind of tuck the wiring out of the way so we can get our connectors and those alignment pins lined up. Whenever you put the push pins back in, you want to make sure you put that base in first, make sure it's all the way in, and then press the center to lock it down. So now we need to run that black wire from the back up to the battery. Now everybody's going to take a little bit of a different path, but you just want to make sure you stay away from any major heat sources like the exhaust, any moving parts like the steering or suspension, anything that would potentially damage the wire. But our battery is actually located all the way in the engine bay up front here. So to help us get the wire up from underneath the vehicle, I'm going to use that same method of taking my pull wire. So I'm going to start up top here and feed it down. And I will say you want to try as best as you can, again, to stay away from any major heat sources or anything like that. So I'm going to come as close to the firewall as I can. And I'm going to get it roughly started, just feeding it down. Because once we start routing our black wire, we can make any kind of little adjustments under there if it is interfering with anything. And then up top here, I'm just going to loop it around. So if I do have to start moving something, it's not going to start pulling on it and pull it all the way down. So I started running my wire towards the front. I went over my Evap canister, going towards the outside of the frame, going over the rear axle. Once I got to the fuel tank, I followed these lines, zip tying it in place as I go, and then again just followed all these factory lines because it gave us a really good way to protect our wire and give us something to secure it to. Just followed all these lines all the way until they came up to the front firewall here. Then I went ahead and grabbed my pull wire and just made sure I went behind these lines so that way there's a little bit kind of holding it against the firewall and it's not going to drop down and fall anything down here. So now we can take the end of our wire. I'm just going to put it inside the Airline tube. Take a little bit of electrical tape and secure it. And whenever you're pulling your wire up, you do want to make sure you get all the slack up top. And it's not a bad idea to go back underneath and double check that there's not a wad of wire. But again, I'm going to go ahead and anchor it off as high as I can with the wire nice and taut. That way we don't have to worry about any excess slack potentially getting caught back underneath. So now that our wire's up here, we need to get to the battery. And we have this cover that's actually covering it up. But if we move forward, we'll have these little tabs. Just want to give them a quarter turn. That'll unlock it. We can lift up and just kind of slide that cover forward. And that'll expose our battery. So you want to grab a 10mm socket, your fuse holder, and we can get ready to put everything in. So we can estimate about how much wire we need. I like to give myself a little bit of slack. So I'll cut the excess off the wire. We want to strip back the end of it. And grab another one of our butt connectors from our kit. And crimp it in place. We want to grab the fuse holder out of our kit. Now this is already pre-stripped, but we just need to pull the ends off. Take one end, put it into our butt connector, crimp it down. Take the insulation off the other end. This time we want to grab the ring terminal out of our kit and we'll crimp it onto the end of our wire. Now at this point you want to make sure that the fuse is not in the fuse holder yet. And we'll grab that 10mm socket. We're going to loosen up the nut on top of our battery terminal here. Take it all the way off. And take our fuse holder, slide the terminal over, and then we can replace the nut. Then we can take our 10-amp fuse, put it into the fuse holder, and we can put that panel back in place. Now with this, you just want to make sure your ring terminal and wires out of the way. Kind of feed it in. Make sure this lines back up. And you just turn those two tabs. And now we can take some time, clean up any loose wires, take some zip ties, make sure everything's looking nice underneath the hood and at the back, and then we can go and test, make sure everything's working properly. So I went ahead and plugged in my 4-pole tester. And if you need one of these, you can pick one up here at etrailer.com. But if I turn on my headlights, we can see that the taillight function is working, as well as the left turn signal, the right turn signal, and my brakes. And don't forget to put the dust cover in place. I just like to slide it over the end of the connector. And if you don't have a bracket to mount your wiring, one option is you can actually use the dust cover to kind of wrap around the safety chain connection point, and that way our wiring will be ready for us whenever we want to tow. But again, I'm Rob here at etrailer.com. That'll finish up your look at the Curt T-connector vehicle wiring harness on our 2017 Jeep Patriot.